So in the last video we refined our explosion, we added a collision object, but let's say we wanted to make multiple explosions. The cool thing about these nodes is basically any points that are in there, they'll make bursts from those points. So let's say add a null, and we'll drag both of these into a null, and at the very least, if you really want control, you can just do the add SOP, and we'll just throw down a few points. So we'll say we want to turn this point on, I'll hit enter, and maybe our I'm going to just check this over here. If your simulation is highlighted, then it's really slow moving these points. So maybe we want to blast there. I'm going to add a new point, hit enter. Maybe we want to blast here, add a new point. Maybe we want to blast up here. Oop. Maybe we want to blast over here. Okay. And that's also cool that these sky blast, when you add the 180-degree spread angle, it's also gonna, spread in all directions. But we can see that they all happen at the same time. So they're looking for a start frame attribute if you wanted them to be at different times. And if you click Pyro Source and go to Burst Animation, there's this, I think it's set to uniform at the beginning, but there's this little, it almost looks like a die, like a dice. If you click that, it just created this adjust start frame. It's a attribute adjust float, but it gives us the start frame attribute, and it's going to set them random. And we can see over here each point, it's the start frame is set to 3, but if we increase the range length, they start getting more variation. So now let's see what that looks like. Oh, and for these two, your trail, you also had to set up the trail generation, the start frame use attribute, and then if it's so it's looking for that start frame attribute, and then if you click this visualizer, you can see okay, so that looks pretty cool. Okay, so what if you wanted to not have to add all those lines or all those points? You could put a circle in, set it to the ZX plane, maybe scale it up. I'm going to move it over because we had a wall there. And then just scatter some points. Maybe scatter 5 points, and then we'll just drag those in. So it's giving us less control, but it's quicker. So that's cool. What if you wanted to so let's see where our box is. Our box is there. A cool thing we can do is we can draw a curve and have it project on the ZX plane. And let's just draw it through there. And I'm going to resample this curve so it has way less points. If you turn on point display, turn that on. Change the length so there's less points. And then we'll do, let's see, attribute expression. And our goal is to have all these points have that start frame attribute. We'll call it custom. We'll call it start frame. And there's this cool way to make it basically each point number from 0 all the way to 1. You do this little drop down menu and you say uniform parameter on polyline. And so now our start frame attribute goes from point 0 at 0, then it goes up with even increments, but it's only between 0 and 1, so then we can do attribute remap. And we'll remap the start frame. It's originally from 0 to 1, and we'll maybe make it happen between 0 and 25. I might have to change our sourcing, but if I drop it in there, I'll have to turn off this random thing right here. But then the explosions, let's see, Doesn't quite look... the attribute expression, it can just be a float, and that might fix it. Sorry about that mess. So anyways, bring it into the null, plug both nulls in here, but the trail goes with it, and let's see how that looks. So now we have, multiple explosions following that path. Okay, the last thing, what if you wanted these 5 points we had on this circle to be like slightly more controllable? In this adjust start frame, it was set to random, and they're just kind of randomly spaced out. But if we set it to make it by attribute, we'll just give our points. We'll drop down an attribute wrangle. We'll just use their ID, and right now they don't have any ID. All we have is a point number. But if we say at ID equals at ptnum, which basically means create an attribute called ID, and it's going to equal their ptnum, and then semicolon, control enter, it creates this attribute, so it matches their point number. I wonder if we could have just put ptnum in here, but adjustment attribute, let's try ptnum. It's called start frame. Yeah, I don't think that worked, but if we do ID, it does work. So we have start frame 0 to 4, and then we can say, we can add to that, we can offset that, and then we'll add different ones. So now between 1 and 22 seconds, it'll plug that into the null, and then this is what this will look like. So that gives us a little more control.